Good evening. The time is now 7:02, and I'd like to call to order the Board of Library Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting for September 9th, 2024. May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Burrell?
Here.
Trustee Gallo?
Here.
Trustee Kelly?
Here.
Trustee Meadow?
Here.
Trustee Rule is absent. Trustee Zick is absent, and President Samari is absent.
If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we time for public comment. Do we have any public comment? All right, seeing none, moving on to the first item, which is the 2024 interior renovation project.
Okay. Thank you very much. So as you all know, we've been working this year on a interior renovation for certain aspects of the building. I'd ask Brooke Irving to join us at the table. Brooke is from Shales McDuff Construction. We've been working closely with Andy Dogan from Williams Architects and Brooke from SMC on this project, designing and getting ready to go out to bid. And we've gone out to bid and we have received the bids back. We had $700,000 budgeted for this project this year. We also did receive $50,000 for the Live and Learn grant for this project. So I'm going to turn it over to Brooke to kind of give us a high-level overview of the alternates that we considered, the project, kind of what the project entails, and kind of where we're at with the financials.
So the high level was the base bid was to add a family toilet room on the second floor here, to renovate the existing men's and women's bathroom, and then to renovate the existing Kid World, boys and girls bathroom. So that's the base bid number. So as Mike had mentioned, we did come in, we were budgeted 700,000. We actually came in at $653,023. So it was 46,000 below the budget. When we went out to bid, we also had 9 different alternates. I'll kind of run down high level, but it was mostly your staff bathroom. So there was a couple alternates to do the 2 staff bathrooms back here. There's a staff bathroom by IT down on the first floor or in the admin area there. And then there was 2 more staff bathrooms in your lounge area. So we also consider those as part of your guys' alternates. As well as we actually, after talking to the library, we accepted is to redo the handrails that go in the when you walk in the vestibule going onto the main level there. So we're kind of going to sand them down and stain them, just give them a fresher look. We also included alternate number 2 was the ceiling that is in the vestibule currently. So as we're touching the flooring, it just made sense to also touch the ceilings if we're inconveniencing the patrons up and staff at once. So we'll redo some light fixtures in there and we'll just swap out ceiling tile at that point and then paint the soft areas in the area. Alternate 3, and as Mike had mentioned, so it was to replace the existing bathroom doors for the men's and women's on the second floor and then Kids World boys and girls door. That alternate 3 also include new frame and then a new door operator. So it actually came in like 55,000. After talking to Gary and the facilities, we didn't really need a new door operator at that point, so we decided not to touch that and the frame. So we are just going to order new doors. So that cut it down to like 25,000, and that's the allowance that you now see in the budget instead of alternate number 3. Alternate 4 was a janitor's closet between the boys and girls bathroom. We decided not to touch that. It was just some tile and some FRP on the mop basin to switch out, but I think Gary's gonna kind of do some aesthetic in that area. 5, which we are going to accept, is to install the wall tile in the new family toilet room. So we on the base bid, it was just the wet wall on the floor. We're going to do tile, so we decided to do tile on all 4 walls at that point. So that's number 5 that is included in the budget. Like I said, 6, 7 is the staff restrooms. Number 8 is just fixtures in the staff restrooms, which we're not going to do. And then number 9 is when the employee entrance where they walk into where their staff lockers are. We're going to also do the flooring in there just to extend it onto the main vestibule. So that's the number you're seeing there.
So what you're seeing on page 2 of your memo here is the cost for all those alternates. That comes out to $45,465. And then beneath that, we have kind of a breakout of all of the financials for this. So our base bid total came in at $420,993. Now that is before contingency, design, architects, general contracting. We had a 10% contingency at $42,099. That brings us to $463,092. And then you take that subtotal and add our construction management, the architect, any miscellaneous expenses, that adds another $189,931. It takes our subtotal to $653,023. Then adding those alternates in brings us to $698,488. And then that last bit there, our budgeted amount is $700,000. So that brings us within $1,512 of our budgeted amounts. So, and then on the last page kind of shows the breakout of each trade and where those bids came back at, and then adds up to the contract amount of $430,569. We received quite a few bids in this project.
Yeah, we actually had a really, really good turnout, so.
Yeah, so we feel like the pricing is actually pretty competitive.
Mhm.
Yeah, so do you guys have questions?
So for the basically 1,500 over, does it make sense to include maybe a little bit of a contingency for those alternates? Like, I don't, that feels cutting it really.
Yeah, the alternates also do include a 10% contingency.
Okay,
And that's built into that, but in this top paragraph on the last page there, I am saying that while there is that $1,512 difference, I would ask that we just include that in contingency, so we have that
Yeah.
additional amount just in case. You know, with plumbing, I feel like there's
always
could be a
something.
surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Mike, so what is the condition of the staff restrooms?
They're older and they need to be updated. And we are planning to do that next year. That's gonna be a project that will, Tracy's gonna talk a little bit about, when we talk about the budget. But we really need to update those as well. Going
Would
out,
it be
to-
better putting it into a bigger project than having it as a smaller project?
I mean,
Next
it
year?
could be, but it would, unless you're doing all of them at the same time next year as well, so it's kind of like if they're on site doing 4 bathrooms, but you would get better. It would actually be better to, for this project, just material wise, and now you're getting an even bulker with like, especially ceramic tile at that point, so, I mean, I could see what the cost difference would be to add on that square footage compared to like if you did it next year and it was a smaller square footage.
See, I'm always of the,
while they're here,
you,
again.
you have a budget and we try to keep with that budget, but you know, it's still etched in sand, you know, it really is until things come in. And I guess I just feel something needs to be done, you know, the budget is just on paper. Now, if we don't have the money is one thing, but I think we do have it. So, you know, I'm more for get it done, you know, especially if we could save some money by doing it this year, but.
And there are some additional restrooms that I don't think are included in these alternates that we are also looking at
Oh,
next year.
oh,
So there's a
so it'll be a
little bit
little
more,
larger
it is a little bit
option?
more. I think
Okay.
it's 2, 4, 6, I think 7 or 8.
Oh,
restrooms total.
wow, okay.
And we'll
Well,
probably update, like the Hendrickson Room kitchen, that's pretty,
Okay.
like the
all right.
countertops.
Well, if it was a
in
bigger thing, I just thought of a couple of restrooms, why not do it?
Yeah, we figured we'd split it up, public and
Yeah.
staff. By doing the alternates here, we get a good feel for what the pricing is gonna come
Mhm.
at for those restrooms, gives us at least a, you know, some guidance for prepping the budget for next year. But no, I totally agree with what you're
Yeah.
saying, and it makes a lot of sense. If it was 1 or 2 or 3, I think. it'd
Yeah,
probably
it's not like you have
just
like
about-
7 in a kitchen and,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's,
it's a little-
that's a sizable
Yeah.
project, yeah.
Yeah, it'll stand okay at it done. And we're gonna do that one also outside of summer, you know, so we're not competing with schools.
Right, right, the next
So-
fall, so, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, I think we're gonna try and, if the schedule works out, try and do it in the spring,
Oh,
to try and,
okay.
you know, move it, because,
oh, that's right, the budget starts in January.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
no, I was just gonna say, I think the alternates make sense, trying to keep everything in the same general area, like you said, you know, why inconvenience people. type of
Yeah.
things.
I mean, like Mike's saying, it's all public, and then you can just
Yeah.
go to staff later.
Yeah. and we are proposing to do lighting and ceiling tiles next year throughout the building.
Okay.
So this, while, you know, we're gonna be coming back and doing that, since we're gonna have the core entrance torn up anyway, it makes
Yeah.
sense to just preempt that, do it, clean it up, get it done, get out there, and not have to
Well, it's
disrupt it
like a
again
small
next year.
area.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else? Okay. All right,
Thank
thank you.
Thanks. Bill. Yeah.
Okay. So looking at the next item, we have the review of the draft of the 2025 budget.
All right, so Tracy Sarah will join us. She's our finance manager and walk us through our first draft of the 2025 budget.
Okay, so in your packets, is the first draft, as Mike said, which is numbered, pages 1 to 18. And page 1 is the overall summary, and then pages 2 to 18, is a separate page for each of the individual departments' budgets. So you'll notice some blue highlighted cells, throughout the pages, but those are just things for me to remember to kind of follow up on in the next draft. So for purposes of our discussion tonight, they really don't make any difference at all. But so starting with the summary on page 1, so you can see in the summary, we include the current year 2024's budget in that first column. And then our current best guess at a projection of where we'll actually end up by the end of this year, 2020.4. And then finally, we have a column for draft 1 of the 2025 of next year budget. And the top section is the general fund, and below that is the capital fund. So total general fund revenue in this draft is $15,898,798, which is basically flat at 0.2% increase over the 2024 budget and primarily represents real estate taxes and interest income. The general fund operating expenditure budget is $16,851,097, which is a 0.7% increase over the 2024 budget, which is really good. And equates to budgeted operating expenditures over budgeted revenues of about $952,000 in this draft. So last year we budgeted a deficit of $872,000. Although you can see about midway down the second column that unlike last year, we do expect to end this year with expenditures nearly equal to revenues. So that's kind of new. We've been running regularly favorable on the expense side every month, like you see in the dashboard. But when you compare expenses to revenue, it's just barely not favorable enough to make up the deficit that we budgeted, if that makes sense. And we'll look at that more in just a second. Then in the capital fund, as far as the snapshot, revenue in this draft is $780,000, which includes interest income and also a budgeted transfer from operating to help fund those expected projects that kind of Mike was alluding to a moment ago. So 2025 costs for those projects are currently budgeted to be $2,382,189. So again, just from the summary, I just want to point out that this draft has us within all of the 2025 budget targets that were adopted by the board back in June. And as I mentioned, the budget deficit does continue to grow a little bit each year. That's just simply because budgeted costs, especially like salaries and benefits, are just naturally going to rise a little bit every year, while our revenue, mainly the tax levy, is just been staying flat for a long time. So that's just kind of the math. But this is the first year that we may end up with an actual expense activity just very slightly over actual revenues. Usually we more than offset that. But our fund balance itself is still very healthy right now. We just want to make sure to keep it that way, long term, which is why I want to point that out. So just to kind of continue with that, to demonstrate it a little bit more, if you look at the memo, there's a line graph I included on the second page of the memo. And you can see on that graph that actual expenditures are in blue, and those are kind of converging with actual revenue in green. And you can also see that those actual expenditures in blue as compared to budgeted expenditures in purple. So over the years, you can see a gap between those blue and purple lines. And that just means we've always come in favorable in terms of expenses, but the size of the gap changes, right? So for a while between 2019 and 2022, we came in very favorable on expenditures. That was likely related to COVID. But then in 2023, 2024, you're starting to see that gap closing a bit. And it just means that we just can't assume that we're going to be quite as favorable as we've been, over the, a number of years. So then on that same graph, the gray line is the levy. So which is more or less flat. Those tiny little increases you see are just that loss and cost factor that we used to include in the budget number, kind of compounding on itself. But the story there is that over 14 years, there's only been one time that we truly raised the levy, and that was by 1% in all that time.
So that gray line is what drives the actual revenue, which is the green line. That's the biggest chunk of our revenue. So, you know, you can see that we have been fortunate to have the gap between the green and gray lines grow a little bit recently, and that's thanks to that higher interest income that we, you know, didn't expect, but it's continued. But there's no guarantee that it will keep going forward. So when our actual expenditures exceed our actual revenue, you know, that's where we begin to kind of tap into that fund balance and into our reserves rather than building it up for capital improvement. So just want to make sure you guys are well aware of that sort of situation. Basically, the story of this year is that I do think it's time to start entertaining, you know, the idea of a tax levy increase to keep up with those rising costs. I mean, it's planned for those important capital projects that are part of the strategic plan. For what it's worth, many peer libraries, say most peer libraries, do take between the 3 and 5% increase every single year. We're very unique. It's been very great for our residents, I think. The village has also indicated they're going to take between a 3 and 4% levy increase starting next year. And my guess is that they will continue with modest increase going forward after that. I don't know for sure, but I know for next year they have communicated to their board their intentions to take a 3.5% increase. So I can pause there for a second for questions.
No, and thank you, Tracy, and just for everyone to confirm that we can take up to the max of levy is.
You can take up to 5% without some additional steps required.
So just that when we're seeing the village it's indicating they might take 3 to 4%,
Mhm.
that's, you know, and the peer libraries are also.
They're like 3 to the 4.99%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Mhm.
okay,
Mhm.
so just that does, generally it stops at 5, I mean, we. could do
Yeah,
other
most people will
actions,
stop
but-
at that 5%, just before that 5% to prevent the additional steps required.
Thank you.
Mhm.
When was the levy, the last levy?
6 years ago, I think.
Okay, so 6 years.
Yeah.
And then, I guess this feels like a stupid question, but is that something you have to put on the ballot to the
No,
levy, or is that, okay?
We would just, when we submit our tax levy increase request, it's just. We've claimed 0% every year, but it's literally just paperwork, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and the village does levy our taxes for us, so they're very intimate with all the filings required. They have to post it on the website. They have to, you know, do public notice of what it's gonna be and there's like a whole list of requirements. But fortunately for us, it's part of our intergovernmental agreement with them, so they do all this stuff on our behalf, which is great. But we do have to communicate by the end of September, preferably, what we would like to do as far as, at least preliminarily. We have longer than that to decide finally, but you know, just give them an update as far as what we're thinking.
And then we wouldn't see that would be, for the tax year. It would be a year, I mean, it would be, because we're in the arrears with our taxes, so for people to see that come through.
Yes,
It would
I believe
be-
you're correct.
I'm looking to you. 'cause
There's-
I
yeah.
just think it's exactly.
Yes, I can't remember what year of
It's not like
assessment we're in, reassessment,
Right.
you know, so yeah, that's like kind of a convoluted, because there's assessed value of different property, there's factors, you know, applied on people's tax bills, so timing wise,
Just
it might not be
Right,
immediate,
we
but
wouldn't see
it
that,
would
but-
be in the budget for 2020. We budget it for 2025
Yes.
still, but as far as, yeah, how it flows through, I'm not.
Yes, I'm right there.
Okay.
But just.
It will fact check it for you when we get there.
Anybody right now?
Keep going. Okay, so just a couple other comments I wanted to note, you know, we talked a lot about economic, you know, factors driving costs up, but I do want to reassure the board that we continue to be, you know, very careful, modest with our controllable, spending. So we separately review, with Sasha and Dana, you know, every single individual request is over a 1% increase. And this year we had over 150 such requests. So we look at each one individually, approve or deny, or think about each one. And we did approve for the 2025 budget about the same dollar amount as 2024, since our fund balance is still healthy, in a good position at the upper end of that policy range. And as I noted, our overall operating expenditures are still only budgeted to increase less than a point, which is really great. But you know, the department heads do continue to do a really good job kind of managing their spending at a department level. And everything's, you know, I feel like pretty tight as far as what we're approving. It's just the nature of those kind of less controllable expenses that's going up at a faster rate that it is becoming hard to keep up with. So while those approved add-ons were sort of flat year to year, there were some other offsetting increases and decreases, even though we net down to only a 0.7% increase on the operating expenditure side. There's some pretty significant offsets in that number. So that includes salaries, right? So although cost of living has, you know, slowed down compared to what it was a couple of years ago, we are obviously budgeting, you know, a fair kind of increase across the board. The cost of living and merit, it's easily our largest and, you know, honestly, most important expense is our staff. So that's a big increase in terms of raising the budgeted expenditures, right? Meanwhile, benefits in total are actually budgeted to decrease next year in total. We look at total benefits. And that offsets the increase from salaries and brings it back down to that 0.7%. But within benefits, there's also offsets. So the reason that's going down is a decrease in IMRF costs. So in previous years, the village has elected to contribute more than the minimum required by the employer. They're not choosing to do that next year. Again, they're kind of in a similar economy and similar, you know, situation as us. They're gonna contribute the minimum required of the employer. So that's a savings on the total benefit side. Offsetting that a little bit is the increase in medical that we talked about. So benefits overall will go down, but those insurance costs will increase like we talked about at length. But the change, I just want to let you all know that the change to the 4-tier benefit structure did result in the library's flooded allocated costs going up less than the overall estimated increase we got from our broker. So that's great. So it turns out that a lot of the folks that were on like our family under a 2-tier structure on our family plan were really just employee plus spouse. So then we ended up getting allocated for 2025 a smaller piece because now with a 4-tier structure, it's beneficial to us. So when the allocation was all said and done, we ended up with a 7% increase in benefits. Well, you might recall how it estimated double digits, 11.3, and we had put like 14 in our targets. I forget exactly what our target was, but something of that nature. So that was really, really great to see it come through in that way. Yeah, so all that to say, like I said, benefits or expenses are going up much less than they could have, but you know, they're going up 0.7%, but our revenue is only going up 0.2% from that interest income. Again, expenditures you're gonna see that deficit just continue to kind of tick up just a little bit. So, you know, you're free to flip through, you know, each department's budget to see their specific ones. So you're familiar with kind of how those were laid out. In the interest of transparency, we include, you know, any and all approved add-ons or transfers in a separate column. Where you'll see it says add-ons and transfers, and anything with a number there will have a corresponding note to explain what it is. So for example, if you want to go to page 2, which is our admin department budget, you can see in the 2025 add-ons and transfers column, and anywhere there's an amount, there's a comment. So if you look at, I don't know, account 2008 consulting services, you'll see there's $16,000 in total approved add-ons included in the 2025 budget number. And there's a note, those add-ons are for consulting fees related to the procurement of a new bookmobile and E-rate consultants. Capital items for 2025 can also be seen in the detail on these pages. So admin does have some. Again, if you just look at the bottom of page 2, you can see capital add-ons for interior renovations. And like Mike was saying, those include the staff restrooms he was just talking about, and the kitchen counters, also ceiling and lighting and some carpeting replacements. The other departments that have capital expenditures are bookmobile for the new bookmobile itself, and then IT for upgrades to our servers and line. So those are the 3 departments where if you flip to those, you would see like what's comprising about $2 million of planned capital expenditures for 2025. Any questions so far? I think that's all I have prepared on the budget. So
I can talk a little bit about the capital projects if you guys want to. Okay. So on that page 2, for the admin budget, just to give you kind of some background as to what we're planning for that. As I talked a little bit about the staff restrooms, we have 7 or 8 staff restrooms that we want to update. Those are original to the building. They're definitely in need of some updating, some cleaning up. The ceiling and lighting replacement, so this has been on our engineering assessment schedule for quite some time, and we kind of keep kicking it down the road. But I feel like we're kind of at a point where I'd like to move forward with replacing the lighting. There are certain areas in the library that we've started doing that, like when we did the Kids World renovation in the Lindsay room, we did replace some of that lighting. We replaced lighting in the tween space. But we are still incandescent and fluorescent pretty much throughout the whole building. And, you know, it's a time to move to LED, and there are definitely grant opportunities available. Our friends are going to help us with some leads that they have. And I think this is a good time to move toward that. So it's going to be a somewhat intrusive project because we're doing, you know, we're going to try and do all of the public space and most of the staff space. But we're not touching the grid. We're just taking out the tiles and replacing the tiles, and then replacing the lighting fixtures with like fixtures. The hanging lights like this, we will not replace, but we'll retrofit with LED bulbs. So on the main floor, as you know, we have many of those large hanging fixtures. To replace those would be extremely costly. We don't want to go down that path, but we do want to retrofit them with new bulbs. The 2x2 fluorescent bulbs, like what we have in the hallways and stuff, those will get replaced with LED panels. And then the cam lightings will get replaced with something similar, but LED. We're also going to look at some areas that are a little bit darker, like when you walk in the Dutton entrance, it's kind of dark there, and all the way up to that info desk, that whole corridor, which is very dark. So we're going to redo some of that. That the tiles in that area have already been replaced. We won't touch those, but we'll update the lighting. Same with like the conference room area and the hallways here. A lot of those ceiling tiles have been replaced already when we did that renovation 12 years ago. We are not going to touch those. It's just the darker, older style tiles that we'll update with the brighter, there's a greater percentage of white. It gives better reflectivity and better acoustics. So, yeah.
But this is just for the interior of the library, because did we already replace the parking lot?
We did do
fixtures with LED?
the parking lot fixtures. Yes, last
Okay.
year we did the high bay lights with LED. I don't know if we did the soffit lights. I think some of those are still incandescent or fluorescent or interiors. Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah, the big ones in the lots are.
Mike, if you need that, we've gone through this project. We did it in 3 phases, though, over, I think, 3 years, the LED switch over. And, yes, there are cost savings. So if you need any, let me know. We can give you some names.
That would be really.
Yeah, you know, I think we went through ComEd, and then there's various companies that, you know, come in and assess and all of that, yeah.
Yeah, they'll do like. the
And
retrofits and
we
stuff.
probably won't really realize if you install next year. 26 might be 27. You're gonna be able to compare your electricity.
The usage.
Oh, no, you don't
We
pay for electricity.
Yeah.
See, that was a big, you know, and we save quite a bit in our budget because we have to pay for electricity. And, quite a savings.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet. Even just seeing the usage drop, it would be.
Oh, yeah, yes,
Yeah.
it's environmental. yes,
Exactly,
yeah,
so,
something that
yeah.
should be done, yeah.
So those are the 2 big projects that we want to do next year. We do have some money in there for carpeting. There's just certain areas of the library that carpeting is looking very worn,
Yeah.
and it's just not.
Upstairs. then
Yes,
do I
the
get
hallway.
too light, so carpeting,
I agree.
yeah.
Yeah, so
But don't get something, you know, have you seen some of these libraries? They're carpeting, you know, these bold geometric patterns, it's too much, you know, and I'm wondering who picked that up?
So we are gonna selectively pick about maybe around 13 to 15,000 square feet of carpeting throughout the library and replace it.
Good.
And I think that's just gonna kind of be a rolling thing, because it just takes such a beating. And, you know, some of our carpeting has lasted a very long time. But some from this, you know, I mean, even the stuff in the hallway is 12 years old. It definitely shows its age, and it doesn't clean up real well. It's very prone to staining and stuff like that. And so we do have a little Zamboni carpet cleaner, which is extended the life in certain areas, but there are certain areas that just really need a facelift. So we're gonna start doing that. And then, yeah, then we had the bookmobile. So, bookmobile, as you guys know, we're working with a consultant. We are gonna go out to bid on that this year. We are paying the consultant, a fee, and like 2/3 of that fee is all of the prep. It's the design, it's selection of the chassis, it's writing the bids, it's going out to bid and making the recommendation. The last third is when we get the bookmobile, they will come and inspect it and, sign off at it for us. So that part, we're gonna have to move to whenever we get the bookmobile. But in looking with or talking with and working with the consultants, we're finding that the build out time for getting a chassis they could have the whole thing done in a year, or it could be up to 2 years before they even get the chassis to build it out. So depending upon which one we go with or which manufacturer we go with, that it's gonna be a little bit hard to budget for that one, but we are, starting to plan that way. And we've been in discussion with the foundation. They're targeting a $250,000 donation toward that. We have a donation from 2 estates, and we're going to put around 100,000 of that into the bookmobile, and then we'll budget the difference. So we may even ask the friends to help.
What do you think, about $500,000?
But between
You
500.
going gas or electric?
Diesel, yeah.
Diesel,
The
yeah.
electric, we did ask about electric options.
Oh,
They're extremely expensive. They said add another 100,000
yeah.
just right off the bat for electric. And the chassis that are currently available are the smaller vans. They're not the bigger
Not the big-
ones. So
the big bus.
not great options for that. But
Next book.
exactly, probably, yeah. So that is, and then we're going to be replacing our primary data center servers. So these are our virtual servers. It's a stack of servers that houses, or it's basically 1 or 2 large servers that house all of our servers virtually within it. We replace these every 5 to 7 years or so. It's a pretty big price tag, but if you look historically, the amount that we're spending every 5 years, we probably would spend at least every year on servers. So it's actually, in the long run, a huge savings to build it this way. And that is up for replacement. And then we're going to be upgrading our Wi-Fi throughout the building. So the last time that was replaced, I think it's been 7 or 8 years. So, as technology moves, different protocols come out, we want to make sure that we're trying to keep up with that as well. I think those were all the capital things.
I just had another question. I see that it was on page 2. So for admin, and I see it's moved, but for the church parking, for it's 60, or sorry, it's
69.
40 6, that it's transferred. I see that also from the other services, but what do we use? Do we use the church?
Yeah, so supervisors and managers park we pay the church to use one of their parking lots, and supervisors, managers park over there to free up space for our customers. And that came out of contingency this year because we weren't sure if we were gonna do it, so we used contingency money. Now that will be an ongoing cost, so.
It's just a separate.
Yeah, so we'll move it to like a more permanent home. Contingency accounts, you kind of think of as things that you're not expecting that sort of just come up, but since we're expecting this, we're just moving it.
So now it's in, okay.
And the reason we started that back up, we used to do this pre-COVID, and we had a fair amount of staff that were parking over there, about 25, 30. And we always received complaints about parking in our parking lot, that there was never parking when there was a program going on or something like that. And it was a great problem to have because we were a very popular place. And during COVID, obviously, we didn't need it anymore, and we didn't renew the contract. But we were now getting to a place where we were starting to get those complaints again. And so
How many parking places do we have?
I want to say 216, 108 underneath and 108 outside. And we have, do you know how many we have over at the Presbyterian?
25 or 30.
Yeah, 25 or 30 that we have.
So like 300 and some inside and outside here, 216 you said, and
We have, 216 for all of our.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that makes sense.
So-
That's kind of low.
And then we do have the commuter lot across the
Yeah.
street also, that after 12 o'clock, people can park there for free. So we do, encourage, staff or customers to park over there as well. But we just thought this would be a good time to start this up again and get people parking over there and free up spots. So
So that 2165, that's the other services, I mean, wait, did I say that right? Is that, so now it has its own, now from 2025
Mhm.
going on? Yeah, okay. Any other? And then, oh, yes, now we're moving here, I was moving, yeah, so now, yes, I can create the long range fiscal plan.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So at the time we last looked at the long range fiscal plan, which was during the budget targets. The most important thing to remember is we didn't have projections for 2024 at that time. It was just too early in the year. So what we do at that time of year is we use assumptions that are based on historical trends. So usually those historical trends are like 5 years, so we look at like an average. So that's gonna be the biggest change from then to now, because we just have better information. Now that we've kind of gone out to the managers and say, hey, how's your actual spending? What else do you have to spend? Things like that. So now we've seen, like I said, that we can no longer assume that we're gonna get as much favorability as we have the past few years. So we really need to update our assumption on the long range fiscal plan for this, and that's in row L. So if you were to like dust off your long range fiscal plan from the target time, you see that's the row that really changed. So in the version you saw in June, we use a 5-year average, which had us coming in, about 6% favorable on the expense side every year, which is great, right? You were always so favorable, but really, based on the 2024 projections, I think it's really more accurate to only use the last 2 years as an average, which gives us less than 2% favorability on the expense side. We're still, like you see every month, coming in favorable on the expense side. It's just, I think, a better number when you're trying to plan long term. So with that change, you can see in row R on the fund balance, I'm looking at the first page, by the way. I'm gonna get to that second page in just a second. Our fund balance healthy right now, it's at the upper end of the range, but it would probably decrease pretty steadily under a long-term 0% tax levy increase. So I just want you guys to be aware. So I did create a second version of the long-range fiscal plan. That's that next one. There you see a couple of blue cells highlighted there, some brighter blue ones. This version includes a few years of a modest levy increase to really fund those services and projects that we need for our community. So the blue is really the only thing that's different between the two versions. And you can see that it not only kind of brings our fund balance expectation back to what we're used to seeing, what we're more comfortable seeing long term, but it also allows us to set some of those funds aside midway down the page to fund those future capital projects as well. And yeah, so those capital projects, there's a page in there too, as far as Mike talked through 2025, but the ones that are kind of on our radar for going forward are included in the long range fiscal plan as usual. So I did just kind of want to point out the two different looks at the financials long term.
Are there any questions? Because we do look at that line R, or we want it to be between 75 and 32.
That's correct, yeah. And it always naturally gets lower as you look at those out years. It just it's assumptions building on assumptions, but in that first draft, we're kind of maintaining that 0%. Now that we have real projections for this year, you can see that's probably not sustainable. So yeah, our next steps are just really to tie up loose ends, kind of keep tightening up the budget. I mean, if you guys are open to seeing draft 2, including a levy increase, I'm happy to bring that. Because the next time we'll talk about budget is October committee of the whole. But I know that is different than what we talked about at target time.
When did you file the levy?
Just, they file it in December.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
the same, yeah, you're right, it's the same for all of us, yeah.
So then this current budget that we just talked about, that it has a 0.
That does have a
Right.
0% increase in the
Maybe
levy.
next December, by next December.
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
Increase.
I mean, I would be open to even even, we still could increase it for the 2025 budget year and include them, because if you increase it now, then your base becomes higher for the next year, you know what I mean? So, you know, I certainly wouldn't, I think we'd be fine to wait till next December, but I think it would behoove us to do it this year for the 2025 budget year as well.
I think the big thing to kind of look at, you know, I know we looked at that line graph. And the fact that our actual expenditures are now higher than our actual revenue, that trend is kind of. You know, we want to get ahead of that getting too far out of whack, because once that starts on the other side of the revenue, now you're chipping away at that operating fund pretty quickly. So just something to be aware of as we go through this, and maybe it's not this year, maybe it's next year, but yeah, just something to.
You know, one thing you can do, we did this, once. Bring it down, you know, rather than 3%, and that would equal, I don't know, $300,000, something. Bring it down to what it's gonna cost the taxpayer. The board would appreciate seeing that. When we did this. What did it come down to, like one Starbucks coffee a month? You know, it really brings it down to, you know, you think, really? You know, we could add $300,000 or $400,000 and it will cost each taxpayer, you know, this much, yeah,
Yeah, we did talk about that a little bit.
yeah.
Mm.
And that's a good, you know, talking point too, if the public wants to know about that, you bring it into that perspective.
And speaking of talking points, I mean, I think with the village kind of being in a similar situation and, you know, pursuing a levy increase this December for 2025, I mean, I think messaging to the community is a little easier, and in conjunction, I don't think we do it because they're doing it. I don't think, you know, anything like that, but it is a talking point as well, to your point, you know.
Right, well, the village might be feeling it now because of the COVID money is gone.
Yeah.
And the COVID money that they, you know, all these places are saying, oh, COVID money's gone, now we gotta, you know, start. Being on our own once again, you know, money is not gonna come.
And everything just keeps getting more expensive.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we've really tried very hard internally to keep our costs, you know, as reasonable as possible, but there's just, you know, a lot of our add-ons this year were just increases in normal, just
Mhm.
basic operating things. I mean, we're not doing anything really extravagant here. It's just trying to keep ahead of
Mhm.
this stuff, so.
Like, oh, sorry, I was just gonna say like salaries and, you know, like just like benefits, like it's
Yep.
like
they just keep going.
exponential.
Well, and that's what I was gonna say, and part of it is staying ahead and being aware of what needs to be changed out before it becomes like catastrophic and it's a much higher cost. So I appreciate, you know, staff and yourself looking at ahead and like, this is what we want to do before it gets to a point where you end up paying, you know, 30% more because it's an emergency.
Right.
So, I mean, that's something to consider. And while we have that favorable balance or the, you know, the capital fund to be able to take care of these projects, it just sets us on in a better, I think, on a better foundation. And even just speaking about like personnel, I mean, we're finding that, you know, agencies, if you don't have the staff, that's the basis of your programs, of what you house here. So, you know, that I think is something that is something to always to keep in mind, that keeping that, retaining the staff that do such amazing work too. So.
You know, far better to have smaller incremental increases than to, gosh, you know, we need 7% this year, you know.
Agreed.
It's better to go 2-3%,
Yeah, you want things to be slow.
Exactly. not like
Agreed.
what the government's trying to push down for the FLSA. Come
Mhm.
January, it's down here,
Yep.
spike up there. I'm hearing they don't think it's gonna fly in January.
Not for that. Oh, really? No?
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
FLSA had to pay more starting July 1st for exempt employees.
Right.
But most of us were not meeting it for January. But I guess HR sources said, oh, yeah, that was it. When we had that, that's where I heard it. We had a director's meeting and they had the HR source person come on, via Zoom.
Mhm.
And she said, it's a real question mark whether it's gonna get increased that
Yeah.
much in January.
Our HR manager mentioned that same thing, and just,
Yeah.
you know, there is a small amount, already in this draft of the budget. We only have 4 impacted individuals. It's a bigger conversation, obviously, with salary bands and things like that, but 4 specific individuals could be impacted if it does
Yeah.
pass, and so we did include something, you know, in the budget, just in case, for now, so, But yeah, definitely more to come. We'll see.
What was the percent increase 6 years ago?
1%, yeah.
$142,000, I remember.
Roughly.
And what was the reaction like was?
Oh, we talked about it, and I kept thinking, it's only $142,000 on a $14 million budget. We can do it, we can do it.
But I meant like from the community, was there like?
I don't think we know.
Or?
Oh, no, yeah.
Well, it can go back down. I mean, I think that shows that it was raised and it can go down. I mean, that's why we have the long range fiscal plan. I'm not saying it would, it's just it's really taking into account what's going on, globally. I don't mean globally, I just mean like in holistically, yeah. So,
The only thing is when you drop it, you are resetting the amount you can get the next year. They make it so that, well, this is how much we need this year, so that's good. But if you are thinking what the future is going to be, you're really leaving money on the table. Because as you said earlier, then you lower it and the next year is based on that lowered amount,
right.
not what you had before.
Yeah.
Bills on each other.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. Well, good.
Thank you.
So other.
The only thing I want to mention in other is that we have a joint breakfast with the Arlington Heights Park District coming up on October 5th at 8:30 a.m. And I believe they're hosting at the Lake Arlington, or is it Lake Arlington or Arlington? That's,
Yep.
yep,
The one off of Wilkie?
Yeah. right,
Yeah.
and by the senior center.
There's an Arlington Lakes, but is there a golf course there?
No.
No, I didn't think so. Yeah,
Lake.
where we met the last time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Right.
All those in favor?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. Take it back. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Now.